Hello, everyone, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Better the Pond Pondcast, where we talk to amazing people doing incredible things that lead the charge of generosity. My name is Warren Berry, and I'm your host and the founder of Instinctive Solutions, where we believe that everyone is an odd duck, but that's what makes them awesome. Today, our guest is Cindy Radu. Here is someone you want to listen to who has done it all: world traveler, mountain climber, accountant, lawyer, author, speaker, and I can go on and on and on. Just try it is her motto. How will you ever know if you don't try? Now, Cindy has felt the highs of being on the top of a mountain. She's felt the lows of being well below the surface. But each of these experiences has contributed to her bettering the pond for mental health and for women of courage. Hang on for this adventure with Cindy Radu. Cindy, I'm absolutely honored that you are taking time out of your busy life to be a guest on my Better the Pond podcast. It is absolutely great to have you.
Well, from my warm heart in Calgary to your warm heart in Regina, it is a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
You are most welcome. How is life actually out in Calgary? I mean, right now, we were minus, I think felt like minus 49 Celsius this morning. And how is it comparatively out west?
Well, we're not as nippy as you guys are. So I love Quick Dick McDick, and I saw his little production on Nippy, which I have sent to a number of people around the globe to say, yeah, when you complain that it's 2 degrees or -3. So we're not that bad. We've been kind of in the -30s with wind chill this past week, but yeah, once it's below -30, I tend to not go out anyway. So whether it's -30 or -50, it doesn't really matter.
It's just cold at that point.
Cool.
I refer to it as character building.
Well, exactly. Although I did, when you told me that it was -50, or I think you mentioned it was -55 with wind chill at one point. My dad grew up on a farm outside of Regina in Assiniboia with no running water, no insulation, the outhouse and all that. And I sent him a message and I said, okay, like -55 with wind chill, how did you guys survive on the prairies in that weather in a little 2-room non-insulated house? And he was like, good question. We burned a lot of coal in the stove, right? So
you did what you had to do.
You do what you have to do.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's jump into this there, Cindy. So now, what got you from being a gosling, you're young, you're a gosling, to leaving the nest to the wonderful person that you are today? Cindy, I want to hear your backstory. I want you to take me all the way back. We want to get you right from the very beginnings to today. What's your backstory, Cindy?
Oh my goodness. So how far back? I don't have that good of a memory, but born in Saskatoon. Let's start there. Is that far enough back?
You're born in I didn't know you were born in Saskatoon. That I grew up there, so we got something in common.
There you go.
So right what? East Sider or West Sider?
I have no idea. I was born in the hospital.
Which one?
And I have no recollection of the event itself. Okay. But my dad was doing his engineering degree there. And so, yeah, I was born there. He finished off his engineering degree. I think we moved back to Regina for a little while where both my grandparents were.
And how old were you then?
Well, we moved to Calgary when I was probably 2. So really Calgary is home base, but spent, every holiday back in Regina. So back and forth, done the drive many, many, many times, whether it was Easter or summers or Christmas. But yeah, a lot of back and forth, and summers primarily on the farm, going back and forth between the farm and the city. But yeah, so fun. I used to get out with Grandpa on the tractor and pick rocks in the field and play in the silos and that kind of thing, and go back into the city and walk down the block to the corner store and buy my ice cream treat. And yeah, it was pretty simple and fun days.
So back when you're helping Grandpa on the farm, that was, I would assume that was in the Assiniboia.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how old were you then?
Well, I have memories into my teens for sure, of being on the farm in the summers, early teens. So yeah, from
Those-
probably quite young to then. And then both my grandparents, my dad's parents lived on Atkinson in Regina, and my other grandparents lived on Harvey Street. So I could walk back and forth between the two grandparents once I was old enough and allowed to do that.
So I want to get this straight. So so you obviously the moment that you were born in Saskatoon, which you do not remember.
No, I do not remember.
You moved to Regina, but you were 2 when you moved to Calgary. Is that
Yeah,
right?
so dad got a job working here as an engineer, so we moved to Calgary. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's where you grew up. So your formative years were in Calgary, right? But
It's
you
actually, can
had
I just pause you there? It's actually pronounced Calgary, not Calgary. I'm just
Calgary.
Calgary. You pretend you don't see the second A.
Okay. Actually I thought that you had a Calgary accent.
You've learned something already.
This podcast right now, we might as well just stop at this point. I mean, there's nothing else to say. So
Your show, man.
so you grew up in Calgary. Now you're gonna throw me off. But you had moments of coming back to the prairies, back to that really home-based farm, wholesome Saskatchewan prairie. And then,
Exactly.
and then you drove back and saw a whole lot of nothing until you got back to the to Calgary and actually saw mountains.
Mountains in the
Yeah.
distance, absolutely, yeah.
So tell me about your growing up. So you went to elementary school there, you went to high school there. What was that like?
Yeah, elementary school. We lived in the Northwest Calgary, and I was able to walk to my elementary school, which was really great. And I went to Catholic school, and I remember it was like there was the Catholic school, and then the school beside us was the Protestant school. And so the Catholics and the Protestants weren't supposed to mix. And, so we had to be really careful we didn't cross that imaginary line between the two playgrounds. But yeah, elementary school, I have very positive memories of elementary school. Then junior high was a big leap because it was I had to take a bus to to my junior high school. You could walk it, but it was a little bit far. And it was great because it was kids from a whole bunch of different communities. And yeah, so that was actually quite fun for me to meet a whole other group of kids and develop some new relationships. And yeah, it was great.
Okay, so I have to ask the question. So you were in the Catholic school. Next door was the Protestant school. There was the imaginary border that you were advised not to cross. The question of the day is, Cindy, did you cross the line?
I've crossed many lines in my life, but that was not one that I was prepared to cross.
So you stayed on the Catholic side.
I stayed. I never understood it. To this day, I don't understand it.
But apparently you stayed on that side.
I guess I was a rule follower in those days. Yes, if somebody told me to do something, I pretty much did it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So there's a bit of history for us.
There you go.
So junior high.
So junior high, junior high actually became, I would say it was a pretty, when I reflect back on junior high school years, holy cow, I don't know that it was over-programmed, but, I remember doing, like on the gymnastics team, I was a cheerleader, I did track and field, I did a Royal Conservatory piano, I played softball, I played soccer, I was doing my bronze cross swimming, I tried synchronized swimming, I did Royal Conservatory speech arts. And somewhere along the line, I actually also went to school. And I'm the oldest of three kids. So I was also, my mom at that point decided she wanted to go back to work. And so I was really helping out around the house quite a bit as the oldest sibling. So yeah, I'm actually really tired thinking about it. Like, I don't know how I did all that stuff, but more importantly, I don't know how my parents managed getting me and all the stuff that I did. And I had a lot of fun too. So I don't know. It just yeah.
So oldest of three,
Mhm.
brothers, sisters?
Yeah, so my sister's adopted, not that it really matters, but this typical story where, my parents tried to have another and they weren't successful, decided to adopt. And then, of course, they got pregnant. And so my brother was born within a year of that. Like, I think their birthdays are 5 days apart or something. And so they're really close. And I'm just the nasty, bossy older sister.
Nasty bossy. I think we should make a point of that. Nasty
Great.
bossy. All right.
I hope you've
And
got a checklist going.
so now well, yeah, it's actually almost exhausting listening to all the things that you did when you're in junior high. Now, did your siblings, were they also active as well?
Um, Oddly, not so much. I think, there was an expectation that we would do some kind of music. And so my sister and my brother both had to take piano lessons. Very painful for my brother, less painful for my sister. But it got to a point with my brother where they just said, okay, forget about the piano lessons. And they allowed him to take drum lessons, which for me was a giant pain in the, am I allowed to swear?
Sure.
Okay, a giant pain in the ass, which isn't really swearing, but just in case, because I don't know how sensitive your audience is, because that meant we all had to practice in the morning before we went to school. And so nobody wants to listen to drums at 6 a.m. And because I had been playing piano for quite a while, even though I do not describe myself as a pianist, I can play the piano, but it's not a natural thing for me.
Mhm.
I could play reasonably well. So you would get to wake up to me playing Chopin nocturnes or whatever, whereas my brother would be banging away on the drums, which meant I had to get up the earliest. I would do my practice time, and then Jody would practice, and then my brother. Yeah.
So he was last, and by
Mhm.
that time you were already like in the shower, in the bathroom, and out the door.
Pretty much. Yep.
So what's the history of the music in your family? Was it something that your mother instilled or your father instilled that was
Yeah, it definitely wasn't my dad's side because they were, farming people, very basic, everything was very simple. My mom's side as well, but my grandfather was a musician. And so on their side, I think the kids all probably took piano lessons. I know my mom took piano lessons, and yeah, there was a piano in the house on that side, and yeah, so music was part of that side of my family.
and therefore, because there was a piano in the house, you were all forced to learn piano.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now the question is, do you play to this day?
I do not.
You-
I do not have fond memories. I do not have fond memories. I mean, I didn't even say, so I took Royal Conservatory music. I also had to take harmony, history, theory, and counterpoint. So in addition to all those other things that I've already said that I had to take, I also had to take all those other things. So it's, yeah, again, I have no idea how I did it, how they paid for it, what they were ever thinking. And it's a conversation I do need to have with both my parents and say, what the hell were you thinking? I think realistically, they were trying to give me every opportunity that they didn't have, right?
Mhm.
And, if I said I was interested in something, and even if I wasn't, they would create that opportunity for me. And so, I did get to try a lot of things. And I think that instilled in me this just belief that just try stuff, right? Like just go ahead and try stuff. And if you like it, great. And if you don't like it, well, you're going to stick with it for a little while to make sure, because just because something's hard doesn't mean you don't stick with it. But, eventually you figure out, no, this isn't for me. And you move on to something else, or you narrow the field down. Yeah.
So looking back, I mean, you obviously you dabbled in like from all the different sports and music. I mean, you dabbled in a lot of things.
And I taught aerobics. I totally forgot about that. I also taught aerobics, like Jane Fonda, like the whole with the what do you call those leggings or with those?
And then was it like 80s neon?
No, this was in the 70s.
Oh, so back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I was still in high school. I was still in high school when I was teaching aerobics. So I graduated high school in 79.
You look way younger than graduating in 79. Just saying.
Well, people can't tell that because we're on a Pondcast, or can they?
there is a video component.
All right, well, there you go. Then people can judge for themselves if they're on the video component.
So look at all the multifaceted things that you did. I mean, that's an incredible story of growing up and just, I mean, and then throw farming on top of that. You're not only what you're doing, music, you're doing all sorts of sports, you're teaching aerobics, and then you're all picking rocks.
Yeah, but I probably picked rocks better than I did any of those other things. So.
But you didn't make rock picking a career, apparently.
I decided not to, but there's always that option. You can always go back to your roots.
True. So bring me up to speed on leaving the nest. So when did you decide that it was time to, mama's going to sort of push you out of the nest and you started to fly on your own?
Oh, there was no pushing. I was like launched. I was launched by, I went to a high school in Calgary. It's called Bishop Carroll, which is self-directed learning. And so there's no, in the day, there were no specific classes. And I actually didn't finish junior high school. One of my best friends, she had two older siblings that were in this school. It was a totally new model. And so the school had only been open for, I think, maybe two or three years at that point. And so they were trying to get, kids to try this new model out. And so Michelle, because she had two older sisters there, knew that they had what they called an early entry program. So kids who were doing well in school could apply to just not finish, junior high school and start high school. So I started high school in May of what would have been my grade 9 year. And then I finished in January. It took me two and a little bit years to do high school. And I had I had a boyfriend in high school, and we were going to go to Europe. He was a year older than me, and we were going to go to Europe with another friend. And so I graduated in January so I could work for a few months to get some money. And then we went to Europe for 3 months, and I was 17 years old. So imagine in 1979, there's no internet, there's no way to communicate other than by postcards or, going and booking an appointment at a post office to call home every now and again. And again, I look back on it and I go, what the heck were my parents thinking? Right? So off I go to Europe for 3 months, literally 17 years old, with two guys. I mean, fortunately, there were two guys that, I were really close friends, and everybody, my parents knew them very well. So they're, they had confidence for sure in those relationships. But what an adventure, right? At that age to just go, yeah, we're going to land in London and that's it.
So do you remember having the conversation with your parents when this idea came up and said, by the way, I want to go to Europe for 3 months at the age of 17?
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the specific conversation, but by that time I'd been traveling quite a bit anyway, my boyfriend's family had a place in Idaho, so we would go skiing a lot. And he was, again, a year older, so he would drive, we would drive down together. We'd done summer road trips down to California and that kind of thing. So I think, once you've established that trust, and I was never, like a bad kid, I experienced life, but I never got caught, and I never crossed any lines, right?
We
So
established that earlier on.
the crossed lines.
Yes. See, it all goes back to the Catholic Protestant Church thing, right? You cross the line then, and you still have maintained that.
Oh my God, you're absolutely right. You've God, is this a counseling session or what? Is this a podcast or a counseling session?
We gotta mix. Why not both?
Well, so that's probably when I started trying to cross lines. It was like, finding my way outside of the boundaries, and yeah.
So you went off to Europe. So you landed in London, and where did you go?
We did pretty much all of mainland Europe. We did, when I talked to my parents, I said, I'm going to raise the money and buy, get my plane tickets and pay for my, my spending money, etc. But would you consider for my birthday and my graduation buying a Eurail pass for me? So that's what they did. And yeah, once we got into Europe, it was, like you'd hit all the highlights, and all the way down to Greece, and at the time Yugoslavia, up the coast, and Italy, sort of all over. So that really instilled in me a love of traveling and exploring the world. And so I'm a big traveler. I love traveling.
That must have been really quite the exposure. I mean, you're in another country, you got all these different languages, you have different foods, we have different cultures. That might have just, I mean, looking back, did it just sort of open up your mind to this whole other world that existed that you'd never seen before?
Well, yeah, also they had different currencies, right? Because at the time it wasn't the euro. So that's actually something that sticks out the most in my mind. What a pain in the butt it was, because you'd exchange currency, right?
Right.
And then it was, you wanted to spend every last whatever it was before you left the country. And we stayed in youth hostels. We took tents, so we also camped. It was pretty remarkable looking back on it. It was quite a remarkable journey and adventure. Norm, the other fellow that traveled with Perry and I, he went off on a bit of a side trip for a while. He went down to Morocco. I think we must have been in Spain, and he'd gone down to Morocco. So we all had different adventures along the way, and yeah, it was fun. It's fun.
I can imagine that'd be quite the experience, especially at that age too, right? I mean, it's just all adventure.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So, what was your first job that allowed you to create the revenue for you to go across the pond, as it were?
I worked in a women's clothing store.
And what did you do there?
I did whatever they asked me to do. So that would be anything from, of course, we would have had the old school cash registers at the time. And maybe we had credit cards. I don't really remember. Probably checks, right? You remember those things where people would go to a store and they would take out a check, and fill it in. And I would, steam the clothes and hang them up and vacuum the carpets and help people select something to wear. You can tell by my incredible attire how fashionable I am. And so, that was my first job. Plus I had the money from teaching aerobics, right? Because that was a very consistent job. And my boyfriend's dad was very involved with the school board, and whenever there were weekend different like tournaments and stuff on the weekends, we would run a concession stand. So we shared the profits from running the concession stand, and we used to collect bottles and recycle bottles. So we were always pretty, actually quite, now you're talking about it, quite entrepreneurial. in the day. So that would have been my very, very first job, was like an actual real job, was working in that clothing store. Yeah.
Now, do you remember how much you made per hour back then? Just out of curiosity's sake.
I have no idea. I have no idea. But I do remember that the URL pass, so a 3-month URL pass, was about $300. I
For,
remember that.
for 3 months.
Yeah. And I would have got allowance. Yeah, I don't know. I couldn't say.
I'm just interesting to look back, and I have my kids, which are 17 and 20, and I go back to say, I remember when minimum wage was like $3.65, and they look at you of how on earth you ever survived, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's I always look back, it's actually kind of fun. So obviously you were back then, you were never afraid of hard work. You were never afraid of putting in the work and putting in the effort to get yourself where you wanted to go.
No, I'm reasonably focused. I mean, when people, when I've shared with you all the things that I did, my day was pretty darn scheduled, right? And I knew what days I had piano, all these different lessons and activities. They were, we didn't have iPhones, obviously, or electronic calendars. I assume I had something on the fridge. I don't know what the heck I did to manage to keep track of everything, but yeah, you just kind of get that, just becomes part of, yeah, okay, this is to keep everything straight. I got to have a system, and this is my system, and boom, 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 and off you go.
Remember back in the day when you used to write things in a daytimer?
Yeah, I had those.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like the checkbook. So
the Rolodex. I used to have a Rolodex.
Out of Rolodex. We're gonna start aging ourselves here. So there you were across the pond. You're gallivanting around Europe, living the dream, and unfortunately, comes the time that you have to hop on the plane and make it homeward bound. And what happened from there on in?
Yeah, well, I love how you had to just, get that across the pond thing in there, like super sneaky, right?
It's a podcast.
This is about me, not about you right now. So take advantage of my story to promote your pond, but that's okay. I can roll with it.
How I roll.
Okay, so I came back from across the pond, and I'd already been accepted into University of Calgary to do my commerce degree. I don't know how I picked commerce, to be honest. My dad and I are, I'm going to say, the only family members with university education. And if we get into it at some point, I've got a few, I think I kind of made up for degrees that other family members didn't get. I just kind of became the one who was going to get all the degrees in the family. But my dad's a mechanical engineer, and I decided to go into commerce. And I remember sitting in a big auditorium, my first accounting class, and we had this great big accounting textbook, and when you opened it up, on the inside leaf were the financial statements for John Labatt. I remember this so clearly. And at the end of the first class, I remember going down to the bottom of this auditorium style to the professor and saying, I'm not sure yet that I quite understand how these financial statements come together. This is after one class of Accounting 101. So he looked at me and he said, honest to God, you're probably not going to pass this class. And my brain goes to, I'm not going to say the F word because I don't know your audience, but I kind of was an FU. And I got an A, whatever the highest grade was in that class, because if you tell me I can't do something, I'm probably going to do it. And I did. So I thought, okay, well, that just kind of carried me forward. And I decided, all right, well, this accounting actually isn't all that bad. And there were lots of jobs for accountants at that time. So I thought, all right, well, I'll just do a major in accounting. And that's what I ended up doing in university, was focusing in accounting. And that was my first career, was as a chartered accountant. Now, I started university when I was 17 years old, because I'm a January birthday. So I was quite young when I graduated, and yeah, did my CA right after commerce. So I got my CA. I wrote my, what were called at the time, UFEs, in 1985. In January 86, I officially got my chartered accountant designation. And yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about that. I'm just kind of getting into now career stuff, but
Well,
it's
that's
your show.
because it's all part of your backstory,
Okay.
right? So there you were, this lively, vibrant accountant.
Exactly, because those are exactly the adjectives that people go right to when you think accountants are lively. What was it?
Lively and vibrant.
Lively and vibrant. Lively, vibrant. So oddly, I didn't actually like accounting. Um,
Because you're lively and vibrant?
sorry, lively and vibrant. I had my first job was with one of the big, at the time, big 7 accounting firms. And there, in my articling, first year of articling, I was on the audit for a big oil and gas company called Canadian Superior Oil. And during that first year, Canadian Occidental bought out Canadian Superior. Canadian Occidental was being audited by a different big accounting firm. And so we lost the audit in the firm that I was working. And that resulted in, there were quite a few of us from top, like partner level down to articling student, who lost our jobs. So my very first, what I'll call real job, I lost my job in my articles. And what a blessing, because I love the oil and gas industry. I hated doing oil and gas accounting, and that has stuck with me. I had never any interest in working in the oil and gas sector, because I had that experience very early on. So I ended up going to another firm that was more of a local firm that had a very different client base, that was primarily family businesses, family enterprises. And I loved that. And I also, the different accounting firms end up auditing the Law Society audits, they're called. So the lawyer trust accounts get audited, and that rotates among the different accounting firms. And that was my first introduction to lawyers. And so I would go off to these lawyers' office, being my lively, vibrant accountant self, and I'd sit in the lawyer's office and, go through their trust accounts to make sure that they were, proper fiduciaries of the funds that they had, in their possession. And I got to really kind of like the accountant or the lawyer personality. So when I finished my CA, I did not have another job, but I decided that I was not a good fit for the accounting profession, and I left my job without having something else lined up. And I ended up deciding that I was really interested in this law thing, and I was going to pursue something that I called at the time law firm administration. I had no idea what that was, but what I did was I started picking up the phone and calling law firms in the city and saying, I'm interested in law firm administration. Can I come talk to somebody? And they'd say, yeah, sure, come on down and talk to whoever. And I ended up at Bennett Jones, which is, at the time, it was the largest law firm in Western Canada. And at the ripe old age of 23 or 4, I was offered the position of controller at Bennett Jones. And I had a staff of probably 17 people. I think one was younger than me, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the environment. I loved the people. I loved the people that I had working with me in the accounting department. And I, I look back on it, and what the hell, again, this is going to be the theme. What the hell were they thinking? what the heck, what the hell were they thinking?
I have to come back to this. You go from I'm going to make a phone call, right? I have an inquiry, something I'm vaguely interested in, and I end up a controller with 17 staff. How does that happen?
Exactly. I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. So I go in and I didn't even know I was being interviewed, but I go in and I meet with the chief operating officer, and then they introduce me to the head of the tech department, and then the head of HR, and then they introduced me to the managing partner, who I came to know later. Everybody was terrified of. Well, I didn't know him. He was just like another person to me. So I didn't have any reason to be scared or intimidated. And, I'm happy to talk to whoever you want me to, and they started asking me questions. Well, what would you do if this happened? Or what would you do if that happened? So I just told them what I would do. Anyway, I guess I must have sounded reasonable. And about 2 weeks later, I got a job, and they said, we actually have been without a controller for a little while, and we do have a position here. Is that something that you'd be interested in? And I'm like, hell yeah. So off I went, and what an adventure. And I still have friends that were lawyers at that time, junior, articling lawyers when I was the controller, and I got I was just swept up. They just included me in all their activities, and I just really fell in love with the profession. And at the time, it was, and I don't mean that law still isn't a profession, but it was old school professional, right? We weren't into these 6-minute billable increments. It was very much of a mentoring relationship, and I felt that I was very much mentored. And I had the opportunity to meet with very, very senior people in the firm on a regular basis. And in fact, one of the things that I got to do was every month I would recommend what the partner draw should be for that month. And I had somebody that I reported to. It's not like I just decided, but pretty much it was an accounting, this is what the number is going to be. And I made sure that I hand delivered those checks to everybody every month, so that I had one-on-one contact with every partner and associate that in the firm that got paid by check that way. And what a great, and again, just very intuitive. It wasn't because that's what I was asked to do. But anyway, I got to the point where I was like, you know what? Okay, now I'm 28. I've been the controller of the biggest law firm in Western Canada, one of the top law firms in Canada, which it still is. What am I going to do for the rest of my life? It's not like I'm going to go be a controller at another law firm, and decided to go to law school.
Well, why not?
Well, why not? Exactly.
So off to the law school you go. And where did you go to law school?
I did law at U of C because I continued to work as controller for the first year and a half. I'd get up in the morning, I'd go into the office, drive up to the law school, do my courses, go back to the office, then do my homework at night. So that was a bit of a grind for the first year and a half. And then in second year, I think it would have been around second year, one of my professors invited me to be a research student on the university textbook on taxation and estate planning in Canada. I know that's probably really exciting, and you want an autographed copy, but yeah. So I was very, very, very fortunate to have that opportunity, and I did eventually become the co-author of that book. So I was getting really very much involved. You'll find this shocking given the history that I've already shared with you, but I was on the debate, like somebody said, oh, will you be my partner for the debate club? I said, I've never done debating in my life. Well, just do it. It's okay, so long as you know that I don't know anything about debating. So of course we end up in the finals on the debate club. Then it would be like, would you be my partner for the moot club? And I'm like, I don't want to be a litigator. I have no interest, but okay, so long as you do closing argument, I'll do it. Well, of course we end up in the finals on, and then go off to Toronto, and then it was the ADR club, and then I'm off to St. Paul, Minneapolis to do competitive stuff down there. And so because U of C was a really small law school, I had a lot of those opportunities that you wouldn't necessarily in a big law school where there's a bigger, get ready, pond for them to pull people.
Well played.
Thank you. For them to pull ducks from to participate in these activities. But so I loved law school. I loved it, and I knew I wanted to do tax and estate planning. I knew I wanted to work with family businesses because I'd had the accounting background. And the fact that I'd worked in oil and gas, and that and then I'd had that experience where I really enjoyed working with clients that were smaller family business and entrepreneurs. And I decided that I did not want to do my articles in law in Calgary because I was going to get stuck in the oil and gas sector. So I decided that I was going to go to Vancouver to do my articles out there. One of my professors suggested that I apply to get a clerkship at the BC Court of Appeal, which I did and was very fortunate to get a position to do that. So basically you're kind of in the sanctum sanctorum with the judges. You brief the judges, you prepare their research for them. You actually get to sit in the courtroom at the front of the courtroom, just kind of below where the judges sit, and then go into their chambers and talk about the case and draft the decision with obviously their oversight and input. So it was a fabulous opportunity. Finished my articles up there, and then decided, I don't know why, but decided I might as well do my master's while I'm
why not?
while I'm here. So I did my LLM, and eventually, that'll obviously we wrapped all that. I wrapped that up and ended up back in Calgary working for Fileski Flynn, which is a boutique tax firm in Canada. Again, it would be right at the very, very top of, reputationally of law firms. It still is. And certainly at the time, it was the best known tax boutique in Western Canada for sure.
You rolled with with the big players. It's obviously that's just how you roll. It was like, you were the vibrant lawyer.
Lively. Now I'm a vibrant, lively lawyer.
That's right. See,
hey?
it's all rolling. It's all coming together.
Yeah.
So, to be a good steward of time, can you bring me up to today? So we talked about being a Gosling, going Saskatoon, Little Regina, the farm, Calgary, right?
Yeah.
You gallivanted across the pond in Europe. You're now an accountant. You're now a lawyer.
Yeah.
Playing with the big dogs, right?
Yeah.
And let's come up into today. What is going on right now?
Yeah. Well, so yeah, I had my daughter, and I'm just going to do this really quickly, but I had my daughter in 2003. I completely shifted gears when I came back into the workforce. I decided I wasn't going to be in a professional services firm. And so back in around 2003, I just started working very differently with high net worth individuals and families. I've worked with family offices, and now I am an independent family legacy advisor. So I work with families of wealth that either have family businesses, or they've maybe sold a family business, or they were in C-suite positions and they've accumulated wealth. And I help them and their families figure out what they want to do with those financial resources to really help the family members flourish and have an intentional legacy for the hard work that they've put into creating that financial nest egg, so it doesn't get depleted over generations, which is statistically what will happen.
And would you say that let's say that what's the number one sort of problem that you do come across in that world?
Well, I think the number one from the family side is, we've talked about this, it's it feels like they're Frankensteining their wealth, or they don't know, people don't know what they don't know, obviously, and we have a lot of blind spots, but it's just a fear of, am I doing this right? Who do I go to talk to about this stuff? Well, I've got my accountant, and I've got my lawyer, and I've got my financial advisor, and people have these perceptions about what these professions do and how they work together that unfortunately is pretty misguided. And as a result, I would say the biggest problem is that people end up creating a monster with their, I'll call it estate planning because that's a term many people are familiar with, but it's really their overall family wealth legacy.
Mm.
And it's a really hard nut to crack, unless people are willing to have those conversations. And I could not do this type of work in a law firm because my client is the family. My client is not dad
Mm.
or mom and dad. And it's a very different lens that I look through the work that I do now.
That is, that's amazing. That's amazing work. And so, and I love the analogy that you're Frankensteining it and you're creating a monster. And so, which leads me to, you've also won awards. You were also now a speaker for Tech Canada as well. And yeah, and you're basically helping people understand that they have created their Frankenstein, they have created their monster, and basically then you come in and save the day and unwrap it all so that they can be successful for generations to come. Is that correct?
Well, kind of. So, number one, Frankenstein was actually the doctor that created the monster. So, in the Frankenstein analogy, the Frankenstein is usually dad, because dad's the one who's typically calling the shots on which advisors they're going to use.
Mm-hmm.
And the monster that gets created is this mishmash of documents that that the family usually finds out about after dad dies. So that now, of course, having said that, I've forgotten what the actual point of your question was. What was the point of the question? Because I'm all in the Frankenstein analogy in my head.
Well, I think it's a brilliant. I think it's it's a brilliant analogy. And it wasn't so much a question; it was more of a statement of just sort of what you do. I was trying to kind of unwrap that you can
Oh yeah.
and understand that they have created a monster, but without even realizing that they created a monster. And once you kind of unwrap that and they can realize what's going on,
Mhm.
you're gonna come in and kind of save the day, as it were.
Yeah, well, I won't call it save the day, but what this weird background that I've described. So I practiced this many years as a tax and trust lawyer, and so I have that. Like, I've worked in big accounting firms, small accounting firms, big law firms, small law firms, big financial institutions, small financial institutions. So I know what happens both from an inside out and outside in perspective and what all these dynamics are, but I also understand all the technical stuff. I don't know the details anymore, but I know enough to know that if I don't know what's going on, chances are pretty slim the family that I'm working with understands. So it's really starting from two perspectives. One is to help the family understand how everything they have actually is going to work. And I work very collaboratively with their other advisors to make sure that we do understand the picture right now. So it's kind of like, what does your house look like now? Is that what you want it to look like? And what do you actually want it to look like? But to get to the what do you want it to look like part, you have to go beyond just dad or mom and dad and have conversations with the bigger family. And that's a whole other conversation, how you define family. But for now, let's just say it's your offspring and their spouses, and potentially into a third generation, and maybe even a fourth, depending on where you're at. But having those having one-on-one conversations with every family member to figure out, what's going good for you, what's not going so good, what are you scared about for the future? Do you understand your family's wealth? Do you understand your own wealth? Just a whole range of questions to get a read on where each individual is at. So then as a family, we gather for a family meeting and we can look at this whole big picture, both from a family dynamic side as well as from the number side, and then go through a process with the family to say, okay, what are really your priorities here? Because you can't boil the ocean. So let's figure out your top 3 or 4 priorities of things that you want to work on. And then I can move into a general contractor role, right? So we don't put the drywall up before the electrical's gone in.
Right.
Right. And if you want solar panels, we need a different type of roofer than if you're putting asphalt tile on. So depending on what's going on in that particular family and what their needs and aspirations are, if it's something that's within my purview and they want me to assist, then I'm happy to do that. But I will absolutely not do anything that I am not comfortable doing, and make sure that I've helped the family find the best fit if it's not within their existing advisor base.
That's a lot right there. You do. So this is really interesting to me that by listening to you, going back to when you were a kid, you were doing all these things, right? And and then as you grew, I was involved in debate, and I was going to school, and I was doing this, and I was getting a job, and I was right. And really, you're kind of still doing the same thing. It's all you're doing so much all at the same time, and which you're like a master juggler. I mean, you keep all the balls in the air.
Yeah.
What an incredible talent.
It is absolutely bizarre. So I've got that solid technical side to me. Mm-hmm. And then there's definitely the project management. And if you went back to my high school and you'd asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up in high school, I remember saying psychiatrist. And then I found out that I would have had to go to medical school. And I think what I actually was thinking was psychologist, not a psychiatrist. Mm-hmm. And I ended up, as you know, going into do commerce. But really, I don't know what I do or how I do it, but all this mishmash that we've just talked about for however long we've been talking now, somehow all those life experiences and everything that I've learned along the way is very relevant to the work that I do with families. And it's super rewarding. I just love the work that I do. I work across generations. My daughter's 17 now, so I'm still close enough to that, those growing up years. And, my parents are in their 80s and I'm somewhere in between. So, I can relate across generations.
Yeah. So, which is a perfect segue to the next question as we move through the Pondcast. I believe that we are all odd ducks. I believe that we're all misfits. And so tell me about a time when you did something differently, when you stood out. What's made you? And it really kind of goes back into that last little bit we talked about. What is that makes you such an odd duck? What makes you so unique that you're so gifted in what you do?
Well, I mean, I think I've probably shared a bunch of examples already, but when I reflect on what we've just talked about, I think ultimately it is, it's just like, just try it. Like nobody would ever say, I remember like the controller job at Bennett Jones. One of my friends said, you're never going to get the job as controller at Bennett Jones. You're like 20, whatever years old. And it actually had not occurred to me until he said that was something that was bizarre, right? So I think what makes me unique is I don't have any real preconceived notions about how things are meant to be. And, like, let's just try stuff. If it doesn't work out or you don't like it, then okay, well, let's go down a different path, but we got to start somewhere. So, pick up a phone and call somebody. I don't have all the answers. I have a lot of great people in my life. I wouldn't hesitate for a second to pick up the phone and say, I really need some help. Can you? And I think that, we didn't talk about any of my mental health challenges. I've been hospitalized with I had several miscarriages, with suicidal ideation, when I had postpartum depression. Again, after the floods in 2013, I went through a really tragic period then. I had somebody very close to me who attempted suicide twice. The first time I found him in a motel room with a sawed-off shotgun and got him into hospital. The second time he built a scaffolding, and there was so somebody else got the email before I did to find out that had happened, and there was an intervention ahead of time. But that took me into a whole other side podcast on mental health, and I decided that I was going to write a book, and I didn't know what it was going to be. I just knew the title was going to be Sick to Death of the Silence. And several years later, I actually, with my dear friend John Gulak, who was an articling student at Bennett Jones when I was the controller, together we did, John did 90% of it. We interviewed 15 different Calgarians with various intersections with mental health challenges. They sat with us. They allowed us to have a photographer in the room, and John did the writing, but they were very brave and shared their stories with their photos, with their first names, with their last names. You can actually, I think, find the electronic version if you search Sick to Death of the Silence. And I would say that's probably my proudest, if I'm allowed to be proud about anything aside from my daughter, legacy piece that I would leave to this world.
I had no idea.
Well, you had to know I was kind of.
That's a whole lot of. I think that's really awesome. And talk about being a misfit, as you took something from your own personal experience, which was really you could consider quite negative, and then flipped it into something to help others. Through the book. That's incredible.
Yeah, well, that I ended up on the board of Canadian Mental Health Association, and they actually ended up picking up the book, which was a great project for them to. I appreciate very much that they picked that up and saw it to its publication. And Kilimanjaro, like I ended up climbing Kilimanjaro. That was. It was like, honest to gosh, it was October. And this friend John, who I mentioned, our birthdays are a week apart. He's a week younger than me, so I'm like it's like no end of grief I get every January because you're going to be older. Does it feel like to be so old? So John says to me, there's this interest. What are you doing for your birthday this year? Because it was the year we were turning 50. And I said, I don't know. I was kind of thinking I might go to Colombia or something. And he's like, well, there's this group out of called Outward Bound that's going to climb Kilimanjaro. And I said, I have no idea where Kilimanjaro is. And, isn't it really high? And, and he said, oh, Joel, you'll be fine. And I said, John, I haven't been hiking. Honest to God, I hadn't been hiking for 9 years because I knew very specifically the last time I'd been hiking was when I weaned Lucy, because I went heli hiking so that I could get away from her. Because I always said to Lucy, you're going to be in university and you're going to be like, Mom, I need some milk in my coffee. Because we both just loved that. We had such a great bonding over nursing. Anyway, long story short, I had less than 3 months to prepare. I called Outward Bound and I said, is there any room left on the climb team? And because I found out they were summiting on the morning of my 50th birthday. So I thought, oh, okay, well, so what if I haven't gone hiking for 9 years? Again,
why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't I? So I get all geared up, and there was a fundraising component. And Outward Bound Canada is based in Ontario, Toronto. And I said, okay, well, if I'm going to fundraise, I want to fundraise. It was for a program called Women of Courage, and women who had very traumatic experiences in their life. And Outward Bound has a number of really fantastic programs. And I said, I'm going to fundraise, and what I fundraise, I want to start the program in Alberta. So within whatever that period of time was, I was able to raise, I think, $30,000, which was more than enough for them to start the program and fund it for a few years. And I climbed Kilimanjaro on the morning of my 50th birthday. I have no idea how I got onto this path. I don't remember what the question was, but
And
whatever.
that's okay, because I can now say, so what are you doing right now to better the pond, and why? But you've already answered the question.
Okay, good.
So thank you for running ahead on me.
You're welcome.
so
You should have sent me a memo ahead of time about what the questions were, and then I would know.
If I remember correctly. So now that we've jumped there, but I'm going to come back just a little bit, because do you remember a time that you can recall where somebody did something for you that left an impact on your life?
Well, I mean, I would probably go back to the story at Bennett Jones, right? Because that for me probably was to have that so to have an introduction to the chief operating officer at Bennett Jones, and to have him take the time to speak with somebody my age and have that conversation, that put me on the trajectory that I've had. I mean, what a career, the opportunities. I'm going to get emotional. Like, not everybody has the opportunities that I've had, and I don't take it for granted.
But keeping with that same theme, Cindy, is that also not everyone also pursues their dreams either, like you did.
Yeah, but I don't even know. I just stumbled into them. Like, I couldn't say that I couldn't say I planned to do this, right? It's just like something kind of lands on my lap, and I go, like, I'm having coffee with John, and he says, oh, there's this group going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And honest to God, I think it was like the week before, and I'm like, I better look where the hell this thing is on a map. Like, I swear to God, like, my daughter was at that stage where she was reading Geronimo Stilton, and she's telling me, oh, mommy, there's all these climate zones that you're going to go through. Okay, whatever. I'm busy. I got a job, and I've got to get all my gear because I didn't even have hiking boots. I was like, I'm trying to figure all this.
I got a canteen. I'm good.
That's crazy.
But I had a guest on recently on the podcast. We were talking about this, but he actually said too, it's kind of like, he was like Forrest Gump, right? He just, like, things just landed, right? It just, and I believe this, that you put that energy out, and you do the right things, and just opportunities just land there. And if you follow life will lead you. And one of my favorite quotes is, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Yeah.
Right. And so as life presents itself in front of you and you start following it, I mean, there's such amazing things can occur. And I think that kind of what I'm hearing from you, that kind of summarizes it, right? It wasn't a plan. It just happened.
There was definitely not a plan. There was no plan. But, one of your podcasts, you talked about with Gare, actually came up the Alchemist. So I'd gone out just to this exact point that you're raising here. Following your personal journey and finding your own goals. Watching, like, I couldn't say that I looked for omens, or that I is particularly aware of it, but there is probably a very intuitive side to me that I don't give myself credit for, to go, yeah, okay, that's something. Like, oh, okay, yeah, let's explore that a little bit more. And there's a lot of things I've explored where I've gone, no, that's not for me. But thank goodness that those opportunities, when they came up, I did go, yeah, let's see what's going on.
And in saying that, though, I mean, look, because of those things, look at the impact and the good that you're doing for other people and families, whatnot, to help them along the way. So you're returning the favor. That's how I see it in my world.
Well, I like the way you see it in your world.
So looking back and looking forward, and the lessons that you learned along the way, Cindy, can you paint me a picture of your golden pond? What is you were the wise sage goose on the pond. You have the crystal ball. You've got all this knowledge because of all your experiences. What does the future look like?
Oh my goodness. I just love the work that I do. I'm on my own now. I don't see any um I don't have this idea of retirement. And I I hope to be of value and service to clients, for families, for a long time. And I love traveling. So it would be, ideally, we get past this COVID nonsense, and I might even be able to find some families and to work with that might be in more interesting places around the world. And but I love the families that I'm working with now. So I could just sort of see a blend of work and travel, and I live a pretty simple lifestyle, and seeing my daughter get launched and watch what her future holds and how that all unfolds as well.
That's a good future. We share a lot of the same similarities. It's you can take your work that we're doing here at home, and we love the people that we're working with. But I look at it, there's so much more within the places in the world you can go see and help and do, and the outside of after this whole COVID nonsense gets passed, right, is to
Yeah.
go and share that around. And I look at our pond as the world. I see it as a one really big pond, and what can we do to create a healthier habitat within our pond. So I had a question that I had come across here just recently, and I'm really fond of it. So, and this, you're the first person I've actually asked this question to. So you're on the top of the tallest mountain in the world, and the world is listening to you, and you're standing there on the top. What would you have to say?
Hmm. Yeah, just don't be afraid. Just put yourself out there, see what happens, and don't be afraid to ask for help, because it's truly a gift to the people that you ask to be able to help you.
That is sage wisdom right there. So, Cindy, I want to thank you ever so much for your time today. I thank you for sharing your stories. I thank you for even getting emotional, because that is true authenticity. So, if anybody wants to find you, Cindy, where do they go?
Well, I'm in Calgary, not Calgary. I'm in Calgary.
Calgary.
My name is Cindy Radu. If you know CindyRadu, you can find my webpage, which has my phone number, and cindyradu.com. And yeah, you can email me at connect at Cindy Radu, I think. No, Cindy Radu at iCloud.com. Let's do Cindy Radu at iCloud.com. Yeah.
And what about on the social networks? Are you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. But definitely you can, all my bio and information is on LinkedIn. Yeah.
All right, and we got to do a quick plug for that book again.
Which one?
Well, how many have you written?
Because people say that all the time. Well, which one? Oh yeah, well, it's not in print anymore. So there was a limited print run, but I do believe it's an electronic version, and it's called Sick to Death of the Silence. And you should be able to find it through CMHA Calgary. Yeah, but if you search sick to death of the silence, you'll find it. And I think
Okay.
that's easy to remember, because really we're just sick to death of the silence. Like, let's talk about this stuff, people. We're getting better, but we're not there yet.
Yeah, and I the reason I'm bringing this up too is I think it's just very relevant now. I mean, mental health issues right now with COVID and everything going on is just it's rampant, and we want to get that message out there that, please reach out, please look for help, please talk.
Yeah, 100%. And if you've had mental health challenges, I mean, I shared a very little bit of it today, but you it serves you to share those stories because it will help other people. And it also I think it makes me a better advisor in what I do. So how I work with families, and just being out in the world, having lived through experience, you have a lot to offer. And I think people need to really pay attention to their history, and and be prepared to be a little bit more of an open book if you can find that in you to do that.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a lot to be saying about being vulnerable.
Yeah.
So does this mean that we get to do a Pondcast part 2 with you down the way?
Oh yeah, because well, you better wait and see if people manage to get through this one. It's like,
But
oh,
it'll be like it'll be the sequel. People can't help but go to it.
sequel, like a Stephen King novel.
Something like that. So, all right, there you have it, folks. We had a great time here today with Cindy. This is Warren Barry flocking off to take you beyond the pond to better the pond, because we're better together. Thank you so much, Cindy.
You're very welcome. Thank you.